In gacha games, every patch brings new faces and new meta. While some characters stay relevant a little longer, over time they get weaker and weaker, to a point where they practically become useless in the meta. Their usage rates drop, their teams get outdated, or they just don't fit anymore. This is a fundamental rule of gacha games. Which brings us to today's topic: is Furina still as valuable as she was just a few months ago? Furina has always been one of the most valuable units since her release, but that's no longer the case, especially after the release of Nod-Krai, the new Lunar Reactions, and even the latest leaks about Columbina. And to make things worse for Furina, we now even have a 4-star that works as a better replacement than her. And before we dive in, if you want to win a free Welkin, we're running a giveaway to celebrate hitting 5K subs. More info is in the description. Also, don't forget to check out Loot Bar. They're currently offering an extra discount for the new version, up to 25% cheaper than the in-game price. On top of that, there are new offers every time a banner drops, and the shop reset that gives double rewards also applies on Loot Bar. Just click the link in my description, pick your server, enter your UID, and your Genesis crystals are delivered instantly. Loot Bar is trusted by hundreds of thousands of players worldwide, and new users even get an extra 10% coupon on their first purchase. Don't miss out. It's the best way to prepare for upcoming banners. Now, let's start with Furina's standout strengths. She is both a buffer and an off-field damage dealer. What makes her shine compared to traditional Hydro units like Yelan and Xingqiu is her Hydro application. Unlike them, Furina doesn't rely on normal attacks for Hydro application, making her the best fit for characters who depend on charged attacks or plunge attacks. She is absolutely the best in slot for DPS units like Neuvillette, Freeze, Electrocharge, or Hypercarry teams. She's also the only option in Veressa Electrocharge teams. On top of her Hydro application, Furina provides insane buffs, up to a 75% damage bonus for every element. This makes her one of the most flexible units in the game. In fact, she is currently the only character who provides a universal damage bonus to every element. This lets her slot into almost any team: Shout's team, Eula's team, or even Freeze setups with Skirk. Even though her personal damage is lower than someone like Yelan, Furina's buffing utility makes her kit feel completely broken.
So how did her value drop despite this insane kit? With the introduction of Nod-Krai and the Lunar Reactions, which do not benefit from damage bonus stats, Furina's buffs practically become useless for them. And looking at the future with new enemies that are designed to benefit heavily from Lunar Reactions, Furina's value only drops lower. Even if your current teams are strong enough to clear, you would always prefer to use new Nod-Krai units for new bosses, since they are practically made to tackle them. This competition became even harsher with the addition of the new endgame mode, Stygian Onslaught. It introduces bosses that are nearly impossible to clear in Fearless or Dire stages without Nod-Krai units. But the biggest nerf to Furina's value is the release of Aino, and the leaks about Columbina. Aino is now technically the second character who provides off-field Hydro application without relying on normal attacks. This instantly makes her the best choice for Nod-Krai units. And being a free 4-star distributed through recent events, Aino is not only cheaper, but in some cases straight up better than Furina. She already outshines Furina in Lauma, Flynn's, and even Nefer teams. Since Nefer relies on charged attacks, there was some hope that she could still be used alongside Furina, but Aino fits the role much better. Even in older teams like Veressa, where Furina was the best in slot support, Aino now gives players a cheaper and very usable option, something that didn't exist before. And we haven't even touched Aino's higher constellations yet. Her C1 gives an extra 80 elemental mastery, and at C5, she provides up to a 20% damage buff. She only gets stronger the more constellations you get in future banners. Looking toward future releases, leaks about Columbina hit Furina's value even harder. If the sources are correct, Columbina will provide off-field damage, buffs for all Lunar Reactions, and on top of that, resistance shred for every element. And being a newer 5-star unit, her personal damage numbers are likely going to be higher than Furina's, while her buffs are much more relevant to current and future meta units. This all means Furina might no longer be the must-pull she was just a month ago. And as we already got a lot of info about Durin, who was speculated to be a vape support and potentially buffing Furina setups, he also looks like he'll prefer reaction drivers like Aino or Columbina in the future. Aino and Columbina are looking like the best in-slot supports for almost every Nod-Krai unit. This means Furina's usage rate is bound to drop significantly. Endgame bosses in Stygian Onslaught and Abyss are already designed to favor Nod-Krai teams, while Dendro comps prefer Aino thanks to her C1 and Bloom damage buffs. Future characters like Nefer and Varka will also prefer Columbina, and even older heavy hitters like Mavika are expected to shift toward Aino and Columbina because of their extra elemental mastery buffs.
So, is Furina completely dead? The answer is no. She is still the best in slot support for Neuvillette, Skirk, or any team where you don't rely heavily on reactions. On top of that, you can always run her as an off-field damage dealer and hydro applicator. But perhaps the most broken part of her kit, something many players still underestimate, is her HP draining mechanic. At first glance, the HP drain seems like a drawback since it forces you to run a healer. But in reality, it actually makes almost every DPS viable with Marashasi Hunter. This artifact set is one of the most broken in the game, easily second best for almost every DPS after their signature set. Furina enabling this consistently is a massive part of her hidden value. Even if you want a different support role from Furina, apart from switching her to healer mode, you can always change your set to something like Tenacity of the Millilith for extra attack buffs for your attack scaling DPS. Even if they don't benefit from her damage bonus, she can still provide value.
You can also run her alongside Aino or even Yelan as a second Hydro unit in Bloom or Vape setups. It is a bit sad though, because Furina might end up being the only Archon to get such a direct replacement. Columbina is technically shaping up to be another Archon-like Hydro unit, and that overlap directly cuts into Furina's role. So should you get Furina in her next rerun, expected around version 6.1? The answer depends. If you're a newer player aiming to clear Spiral Abyss or Stygian Onslaught, I would say go for the newer units. Dropping Furina is the smarter choice, since even if you're planning to pull Skirk, you can pair her with someone like Escoffier, who is an even better support in that comp. But if you're already an endgame player clearing content comfortably and you don't have Furina yet, then yes, she's still worth picking up. She remains one of the best in-slot supports, ranking on a similar level to Zilan N for pre-Nod-Krai teams. And she will always hold value as a secondary Hydro option, whether as a damage dealer or buffer. We also cannot forget that 2 new floors were recently added in Imaginarium Theater, and that type of content will always value flexible units like Furina. Honestly, her situation is looking very similar to Nahida's, or maybe even a bit worse. Nahida, as an EM scaling unit, will always get better over time, even if she's no longer the best after Lauma. But Furina already faces direct competition from units like Yelan, who offers better personal damage and Hydro application, and now Shinkyu and Aino as cheaper 4-star alternatives. Her position as the uncontested best Hydro unit is now more challenged than ever. So what do you think? Is Furina still as evergreen as she once was, or has her time at the top already started to fade?